Most people are taught from childhood that life rewards effort. If you work harder, stay disciplined, and push through, eventually success will come. This idea is so deeply embedded into our cultural fabric that we rarely question it. But if effort alone were enough, then every hard-working person would be thriving. Every late-night worker, every exhausted parent, every ambitious dreamer would be living a life of abundance, peace, and fulfillment. Yet the truth is undeniable. Countless people who push themselves relentlessly remain stuck, unfulfilled, and constantly disappointed. And this is where Owen Hermstring begins to dismantle one of the greatest illusions we've been sold. In his book, The Law Behind the Laws, he writes, "Reality does not bend to effort, it bends to alignment." What does that mean? It means the universe doesn't care how hard you try if the energy you are radiating contradicts what you are trying to achieve. You can wake up early, grind for hours, chase opportunities, and repeat affirmations until you lose your voice. But if, underneath all of that, your subconscious is whispering that you don't deserve success, that you're not enough, or that life is against you, then your effort will only reinforce your struggle. It will create more exhaustion, not more results. The mechanics of reality are not fueled by sheer willpower. They are governed by resonance. Think of it like a radio signal. You can shout into the microphone, increase the volume, and press every button on the panel. But if you're tuned to the wrong frequency, your message will never reach the station you're aiming for. In the same way, your actions in the physical world are like the microphone, but your energetic frequency, shaped by your emotions, beliefs, and subconscious patterns, is the channel. No matter how much you scream into the wrong channel, the right station will never hear you. Hermstring emphasizes this by pointing to a universal law that operates quietly beneath all the surface rules of society. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. This is the first crack in the illusion of effort, because what you are is not defined by your goals or your intentions, but by the vibration you consistently embody. If you are chasing success from a place of fear, you are broadcasting fear. If you are searching for love from a place of loneliness, you are broadcasting lack. And reality, being the perfect mirror, reflects back exactly what you're broadcasting. No exceptions. This explains why some people seem to flow effortlessly into opportunities while others work tirelessly and still feel invisible. The difference isn't in effort, but in alignment. The ones who succeed without burning out have tuned their inner frequency to match the life they desire. Their energy, not just their actions, tells the universe, this is who I am and this is what I'm available for. But here's the painful part. Most people don't realize they are out of alignment because they mistake motion for progress. They believe being busy means they're getting closer to their dreams. But busyness can often be a form of self-sabotage. You can run in circles all day, chasing after a future that never comes, simply because your inner signal contradicts your outer effort. Hermstring puts it bluntly, effort without alignment is like rowing against the current. You may move, but you'll never arrive. So how do you recognize if you're trapped in this cycle? The first sign is exhaustion without fulfillment. If your days are filled with work, sacrifice, and constant striving, yet you feel empty at night, that's a clear indicator that your effort is disconnected from resonance. The second sign is repetition of failure. If the same disappointments keep resurfacing, the same type of relationships, financial struggles, or dead-end jobs, it's not random chance. It's the mirror of your energy. The third sign is resentment. When effort doesn't bring results, bitterness grows. And that bitterness feeds the cycle, creating even more resistance. Hermstring invites us to reframe the way we think about reality. Instead of asking, how much harder must I work? He urges us to ask, what am I aligned with? Because alignment doesn't mean doing nothing. It means that your actions are infused with the energy of clarity, worthiness, and resonance. When you act from alignment, even small steps create momentum. When you act from misalignment, even massive effort collapses under its own weight. Imagine two people applying for the same job. The first walks into the interview radiating anxiety, desperation, and self-doubt. They've prepared, they've rehearsed, they've done everything by the book, but their energy screams, I don't belong here. The second person walks in with quiet confidence, a sense of self-trust, and an inner calm that says, this opportunity is aligned with me. Who do you think the interviewer feels more drawn to? Both may have worked hard, but only one is in alignment. This is the hidden mechanic of reality. that Hermstring calls the law behind the laws. Society teaches you the surface rules. Study hard, work hard, network, grind, and while these things matter, they are secondary to the deeper law that shapes outcomes, resonance. The law behind the laws is that your reality cannot betray your energy. If you don't shift your frequency, you will remain stuck in the same loop no matter how much effort you apply. That's why Hermstring insists that transformation can happen in as little as 6 months. Not because 6 months of effort is extraordinary, but because 6 months of alignment is revolutionary. Once you shift your baseline energy, reality must follow. It has no choice. The laws are impersonal, unwavering, and precise. Just as gravity doesn't care who you are, resonance doesn't care what you intend. It only reflects what you embody. So the first step in changing your reality isn't to double your effort. It's to change the signal you're broadcasting. This requires honesty, courage, and awareness. What's your real emotional baseline? What's the unspoken belief behind your effort? If you can uncover that, you've already begun the process of alignment. And once alignment is in place, effort becomes powerful instead of exhausting. If the first lesson of transformation is that effort without alignment leads nowhere, then the very next step is awareness, because you cannot align with a new reality while blind to the hidden forces driving your current one. Owen Hermstring calls these forces the invisible contracts. They are unspoken agreements you made with yourself, often in childhood, when you had no idea that those silent promises would one day shape your entire reality. Month 1 of this 6-month journey is about exposing those contracts. So what exactly is an invisible contract? Imagine a child growing up in a household where every time they spoke up, they were punished or mocked. The child unconsciously signs a contract. It's safer not to speak. Fast forward 20 years, and that adult wonders why they can't find their voice in meetings, why they freeze in public speaking, why they swallow their truth in relationships. The invisible contract is still in effect, running their life like an outdated operating system. Hermstring explains in The Law Behind the Laws, the subconscious never forgets the agreements made in pain. Until they are brought to light, they rule as unchallenged law. And that is the trap. These contracts feel so natural, so woven into the fabric of your identity, that you mistake them for personality. You don't say, "I signed a contract never to speak." You say, "I'm just shy." You don't say, "I signed a contract never to need help." You say, "I'm independent." But beneath those identities are old agreements you never consciously chose. The first month of transformation is not about changing anything yet. It's about noticing. It's about slowing down enough to see the threads pulling at your decisions. Where do you hold yourself back? Where do you overcompensate? Where do you feel a sense of dread or tightness when opportunities arise? These are often signs of a contract in place. For example, someone who repeatedly ends up in toxic relationships may be unconsciously living by the contract. I must earn love by sacrificing myself. Another who struggles financially despite talent and hard work may be loyal to the contract. Money causes conflict, so I must never have too much. These agreements don't operate in language. They operate in energy. And reality mirrors that energy back to you again and again until you finally see the pattern. Hermstring suggests a simple but confronting practice for this stage. Write down the areas of life where you feel stuck. Then, instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" ask, "What must I believe about myself or the world for this pattern to keep repeating?" When you put it into words, you often uncover the contract. I believe I'm not worthy of love. I believe asking for more makes me greedy. I believe being visible is dangerous. It may feel shocking, even painful to see it on paper, but that's the point. Awareness dissolves invisibility, and what you can see you can change. The beauty of this first month is that you don't have to take radical action yet. You don't need to quit your job, end relationships, or rewrite your entire life in 4 weeks. You only need to become radically honest about the laws you've been obeying without question. Hermstring reminds us, freedom doesn't begin with breaking chains. It begins with realizing they're there. Why is this awareness step so essential? Because if you skip it, you end up layering new intentions over old agreements. You say affirmations about abundance while still living by the contract of scarcity. You visualize love while still obeying the contract of unworthiness. And then you wonder why nothing changes. It's because the subconscious contract always wins until it's revoked. During this month, you may feel resistance. Part of you will want to defend the contracts. After all, they kept you safe once. Staying quiet did protect you as a child. Playing small did reduce conflict. Overgiving did keep people close. These agreements were survival strategies. Honoring that truth is important, but survival is not the same as living. And now these contracts cost you more than they save. Some days in this stage may feel heavy. Old memories may surface. You may realize how much of your life has been dictated by agreements you never consciously made. But rather than see this as depressing, Hermstring urges us to see it as liberation. Because the moment you identify a contract, you loosen its grip. You are no longer unconsciously bound. You are now the witness, and witnessing is the beginning of freedom. By the end of this first month, the goal is simple: awareness. You should be able to point to your core invisible contracts and name them. They might sound like, I agree to stay small to be loved. I agree to hide my truth to avoid rejection. I agree to struggle because ease feels unsafe. When you see these sentences clearly, you are no longer blindly signing them. You are holding the pen. This awareness sets the stage for every step that follows. Because once the contracts are visible, you can begin reprogramming them. You can consciously tear them up and write new ones. But that's the work of month 2. For now, your task is to expose what has been hidden, to shine light on the laws beneath the laws that have ruled your life without your consent. Hermstring concludes this stage with a reminder: you are not broken, you are bound, and what is bound can be unbound once it is seen. By the end of the first month, you've uncovered the invisible contracts that have shaped your life. You've brought into awareness the beliefs, agreements, and survival strategies that silently dictated your choices. But awareness alone is not enough. If all you do is expose the blueprint of your subconscious, you might feel liberated for a moment, but eventually the old program will run again. That's why the second month of this journey is dedicated to reprogramming, the process of rewriting the subconscious blueprint that determines what reality you experience. Owen Hermstring reminds us in The Law Behind the Laws, the subconscious does not obey reason. It obeys repetition. This is one of the most profound truths to understand. Your conscious mind might decide to change, to declare new intentions, to affirm new beliefs. But your subconscious is like soil. It doesn't respond to declarations, it responds to seeds planted consistently. It will grow whatever you feed it most often, whether that's fear or faith, scarcity or abundance, shame or worthiness. Think of your subconscious as the software that runs in the background of your life. You can install new apps on your phone, but if the operating system hasn't been updated, those apps won't function properly. In the same way, you can set new goals, make new plans, or adopt new habits. But if your subconscious programming is still running on fear, self-doubt, or unworthiness, your actions will always glitch. You'll find yourself sabotaging, procrastinating, or circling back to the same outcomes. So how do you reprogram this blueprint? Hermstring offers several principles, and the first is immersion. He writes, "The subconscious cannot resist what it repeatedly experiences." This means that if you want to shift from a contract of scarcity to one of abundance, you must immerse yourself in the feeling of abundance daily. Not once a week, not only when life feels good, but every single day. The subconscious learns through repetition, not through logic. This is where practices like visualization, affirmations, and embodied rituals come into play. But Hermstring warns against using them superficially. Saying, "I am abundant," while feeling fear, only reinforces the fear. The key is to create emotional resonance with the words, so the subconscious accepts them as true. When you visualize, you must step into the scene fully, hear the sounds, feel the sensations, embody the emotions of the future you desire. Because to the subconscious, imagination and reality are the same. The second principle is rewriting through action. The subconscious doesn't only learn through thought, it learns through lived experience. If your old contract says, "It's unsafe to be seen," then every time you avoid speaking up, you reinforce that contract. To reprogram it, you must take aligned action that contradicts the old rule. Speak even when your voice shakes. Ask for help, even when you fear rejection. Set boundaries even when you feel guilty. Every small act rewires the subconscious. It tells your system, the old rule no longer applies. The third principle is emotional rehearsal. Hermstring describes it like this: Your future reality depends less on what you think about it and more on what you feel about it. So this month is about creating new emotional baselines. If you've been used to living in fear, worry, or resentment, your task is to rehearse joy, gratitude, and confidence until they become familiar. This doesn't mean denying your pain. It means choosing to spend more time in emotions that match the life you're creating. Repetition and consistency are crucial here. Hermstring often compares reprogramming to training a muscle. You don't go to the gym once and expect lifelong strength. You go consistently, and over time, the results become visible. In the same way, reprogramming your subconscious requires daily practices, moments of awareness, intentional action, emotional rehearsal, and self-affirmation. At first, it may feel forced or awkward, but with time, it becomes natural. It's also important to note that resistance will arise. The subconscious doesn't like change because its primary job is to keep you safe. Even if your old programming kept you stuck, it was predictable, and the subconscious equates predictability with safety. So when you begin installing new beliefs your system may resist, you may hear the voice of doubt saying, "This won't work." You may feel old fears rising stronger than before. But Hermstring reassures us, resistance is not a sign you're failing. It's a sign the old contract is dissolving. Another powerful tool in this stage is rewriting your inner dialogue. Pay attention to the way you speak to yourself in your mind. Do you constantly call yourself lazy, unlucky, unworthy? Those words reinforce the old programming. Begin replacing them with words that affirm your worth, your capacity, and your truth. Even small shifts like "I'm learning" instead of "I'm failing" create new pathways in the subconscious. By the end of this second month, your goal is not perfection, but progress. You don't need to erase every limiting belief. You simply need to establish new ones strongly enough that they begin to take root. You'll know you're succeeding when you start catching yourself before old patterns play out, when you notice hesitation and choose courage anyway, when you begin to feel emotions of peace or confidence in situations where you once felt fear. This stage is both challenging and exhilarating. It requires patience and persistence, but it also offers glimpses of transformation. You may find yourself naturally attracting opportunities you used to chase, or feeling calmer in moments that once overwhelmed you. These are signs that the subconscious blueprint is shifting. And once it shifts, your external reality will follow. By the third month of this journey, something becomes clear. Changing your reality is not only about shifting thoughts or rewriting contracts, but about transforming the emotions that define your daily state of being. Owen Hermstring stresses this point in The Law Behind the Laws when he writes, "Your reality does not answer to your words, but to the emotional frequency you inhabit most often." This means that your life is not being shaped primarily by what you want or what you say, but by what you consistently feel. Month 3 is about creating what Hermstring calls an emotional reset. It is the deliberate process of establishing a new emotional baseline, one that supports the reality you want to create instead of the one you're trying to escape. Because here is the hidden truth. If your baseline emotion is fear, your life will mirror fear. If your baseline is scarcity, your experiences will confirm lack. If your baseline is unworthiness, then no matter what you achieve, it will never feel like enough. This is why so many people remain trapped, even after trying affirmations, vision boards, or endless self-help programs. They are layering positive words over a negative emotional state. The subconscious doesn't respond to the words. It responds to the emotion beneath them. Hermstring says, if your heart vibrates with doubt, your mind can scream abundance all day long. Reality will only hear the doubt. The first step in this month's work is awareness of your current baseline. Ask yourself, what emotion do I spend the most time in? Not the peaks of joy or the valleys of despair, but the quiet hum that follows me through the day. Is it anxiety, resentment, guilt, or is it peace, confidence, gratitude? Becoming honest about your baseline is essential, because you cannot reset what you refuse to see. Once you've identified your baseline, the second step is emotional rehearsal. This is different from faking happiness or suppressing pain. It is about choosing in small and consistent ways to spend more time in the emotions that match the reality you want to live. For example, if your goal is to create abundance, ask yourself, when during the day can I feel abundance right now? It could be the sensation of being nourished by a meal, the gratitude for a roof over your head, or the warmth of human connection. Those moments are not trivial, they are keys. By consciously amplifying them, you are training your nervous system to normalize abundance instead of lack. Hermstring compares this process to tuning an instrument. A guitar doesn't magically play in tune. It requires intentional adjustment, string by string, until harmony is achieved. Your emotional body works the same way. If one string is vibrating with fear, it throws off the whole melody of your life. Month 3 is your opportunity to tune those strings until your emotional resonance matches the song of the reality you desire. Another crucial aspect of this reset is learning to interrupt old emotional loops. Most of us have default reactions we fall into without thinking. Someone criticizes us, and we spiral into shame. Money runs tight, and we fall into panic. A loved one disappoints us, and we sink into resentment. These loops become so familiar that we don't even question them. But Hermstring teaches that each loop is an opportunity for interruption. The moment you catch yourself falling into the old emotional response, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what else could I feel right now? What new choice could I make? That pause is the doorway to a new baseline. For instance, instead of spiraling into panic when money is tight, you might choose gratitude for what is already available. Instead of drowning in resentment when disappointed, you might choose compassion or detachment. At first, this feels forced, but with practice, it becomes natural. Over time, your nervous system learns that it doesn't have to live in fear or anger. It can live in trust, peace, and empowerment. Hermstring warns, however, that the old emotions will resist. He writes, "Your body is addicted to the chemicals of your old self. It will crave the familiar pain even when it longs for freedom." This is why transformation feels so uncomfortable. It's not only about changing your mind, it's about retraining your body to stop chasing the emotions of suffering. And like any addiction, it takes time, discipline, and consistency to break. The key is not perfection, but persistence. You will slip back into old emotions, that's inevitable. But each time you interrupt the loop and choose differently, you weaken the hold of the old baseline and strengthen the new one. Even 1 minute a day spent in elevated emotions like gratitude, joy, or confidence is more powerful than hours of worry. Why? Because elevated emotions carry higher frequencies that begin to override the lower ones. By the end of this month, you should begin to notice subtle but powerful shifts. Situations that once triggered you may lose their grip. People who once drained you may no longer affect you in the same way. Opportunities may begin to appear that feel strangely aligned, as if life itself is rearranging in your favor. This is not coincidence, it is resonance. When your baseline changes, the mirror of reality must change with it. Hermstring sums it up in one of the book's most impactful lines: "You don't chase joy to find it. You rehearse joy until joy chases you." That's the purpose of the emotional reset, to stop being a victim of old emotions and become the creator of new ones. To establish a baseline so magnetic, so aligned, that reality has no choice but to reflect it back. Month 3 is where the transformation becomes visible, not just in how you think, but in how you feel. And when your feelings change, your world begins to shift, slowly at first, then all at once. By the 4th month of this journey, you've already begun to see yourself differently. You've exposed the invisible contracts that were quietly dictating your life. You've started to reprogram the subconscious blueprint that kept repeating old cycles. And in the 3rd month, you laid the foundation of a new emotional baseline, one that aligns more closely with the life you want to create. But all of this work will remain theoretical unless you take the next step, embodiment. Owen Hermstring says it clearly in The Law Behind the Laws. You don't create reality by wishing for it. You create it by living as if it's already true. This is the essence of embodiment. It's not about pretending. It's not about faking until you make it. It's about stepping into alignment so fully that your thoughts, emotions, and actions broadcast the same frequency. When you embody the law, you no longer send mixed signals to the universe. You become the vibration of what you desire. Think about the difference between knowing and being. Knowing is intellectual. You can understand the principles of abundance, love, or peace, and still live as though you are broke, unworthy, or anxious. Being, on the other hand, means your entire system, body, mind, and energy, reflects the truth of what you claim. Embodiment is about crossing that bridge from theory into lived reality. The challenge, of course, is that your current reality might not match what you're embodying. Maybe you're working on abundance, but your bank account is low. Maybe you're embodying love, but you're still single. Maybe you're embodying confidence, but you don't yet have the career breakthrough you've been waiting for. This is where most people fall back into old patterns, because they mistake external evidence for internal truth. Hermstring warns us, the external world always lags behind the internal shift. If you wait for proof before you embody, you'll wait forever. This means you must begin living as if the reality you want is already unfolding, even when no evidence exists. That's the leap of faith. That's the law behind the laws. So how do you practice embodiment in the 4th month? Start by asking, if my desired reality were already true, how would I show up today? If you were already abundant, how would you carry yourself? Would you walk with a different posture? Would you make decisions with more confidence? If you were already deeply loved, how would you treat yourself? Would you speak with more kindness? Would you set clearer boundaries? If you were already successful, how would you spend your mornings? How would you talk about your work? These questions pull embodiment out of the abstract and make it practical, because embodiment isn't just about meditation or visualization, it's about action. It's the way you speak, the way you breathe, the way you choose. Every small behavior becomes a declaration of who you are. For example, someone working on abundance might begin tipping generously, even if it's just an extra $1. That act embodies abundance. Someone working on self-worth might begin dressing in a way that reflects dignity, regardless of how others respond. Someone embodying love might stop chasing those who don't reciprocate and instead cultivate self-care rituals that reflect unconditional acceptance. These choices are not symbolic, they are energetic. Each one sends a signal to the subconscious. This is who I am now. And as Hermstring reminds us, once the subconscious accepts the new identity, reality has no choice but to follow. The world doesn't resist when you stop resisting yourself, he writes. Embodiment is the way you prove to your subconscious that the new program is real, not just an idea. Of course, resistance will arise. There will be moments when your external reality screams the opposite of what you're embodying. You may declare abundance and still get hit with unexpected bills. You may embody worthiness and still face rejection. But this is the test. Can you hold the new frequency even when the old world pushes back? Can you keep living as if, instead of collapsing back into doubt? Hermstring compares this stage to planting seeds. You don't dig them up every day to check if they're growing. You water them, you give them light. You trust the unseen process beneath the soil. Embodiment is that trust in action. You keep living as if, not because the results are instant, but because the law guarantees the results must eventually come. Month 4 is also about congruence. Many people sabotage their progress because their words, emotions, and actions are misaligned. They speak affirmations of success while acting from fear. They visualize love while tolerating neglect. They meditate on peace but live in chaos. Embodiment requires harmony. Words, feelings, and choices must all point in the same direction. When they do, the signal you send to reality becomes clear, powerful, and undeniable. By the end of this month, you should feel a noticeable shift in your identity. You are no longer just someone trying to change your life. You are someone living as though the change has already begun. This doesn't mean you're delusional or ignoring reality. It means you're choosing to trust resonance over appearances. And that shift in identity is what accelerates the transformation. Hermstring captures this stage in a single phrase. Don't ask when it will come. Ask who you must be until it does. That is embodiment. That is the practice of month 4. And if you hold to it, your external world will begin to reorganize around the truth you've already chosen to live. By the 5th month, something almost inevitable happens. Just as your new reality begins to take root, resistance shows up. It may appear as unexpected challenges, old temptations, or even sudden doubts about whether you've been wasting your time. This is the stage Owen Hermstring calls the Valley of Loss, where the subconscious begins to panic because the old identity is dying. And make no mistake, for the subconscious, this feels like a real death. Hermstring explains in The Law Behind the Laws, your old self doesn't let go quietly. It fights to survive, because it believes it is you. That's why when you start making progress, you may feel waves of fear, sadness, or even grief. It's not that you're doing something wrong. It's that you're finally dismantling the structure that kept you trapped. Think about it this way. For years, your subconscious has built safety around familiar patterns. Even if those patterns hurt you, they were predictable. They gave you a false sense of stability. When you disrupt them, the subconscious interprets it as danger. So it resists. It tries to pull you back. It whispers, "Go back to what you know. Go back to who you were." This resistance often shows up as self-sabotage. Maybe you've been consistent with new habits, and suddenly you start skipping them. Maybe you've been embodying worthiness, and then you fall into an old relationship pattern. Maybe you've been affirming abundance, and then you make a reckless financial decision that drags you backward. These are not failures. They are signs you're entering the deeper layers of transformation. Hermstring warns us not to mistake resistance for a message to stop. The moment you feel like giving up is usually the moment you're closest to the breakthrough, he writes. This is why month 5 is about learning to recognize resistance for what it really is. Proof that the old program is collapsing. Another important aspect of this stage is grief. People rarely talk about the grief that comes with growth, but leaving behind old identities means leaving behind old comforts, old friendships, old routines. Some of the things that used to define you may no longer fit the person you're becoming, and that loss can sting. You may feel nostalgic, lonely, or even guilty. Hermstring encourages us to honor this grief instead of denying it. He says, every new life requires a funeral for the old one. If you don't let yourself mourn, you won't let yourself be reborn. This perspective transforms resistance into part of the process rather than a barrier to it. Practical steps for month 5 include learning to sit with discomfort without running back to the old reality. When fear arises, don't fight it. Acknowledge it as the echo of your past identity. When sadness appears, allow it as the price of growth. When sabotage tries to sneak in, see it as a test of your commitment rather than a sign of failure. One powerful exercise Hermstring suggests is writing a farewell letter to the old self. You thank it for how it tried to protect you. You acknowledge the role it played in keeping you alive up to this point, but then you release it. You declare that it no longer defines who you are. This symbolic act helps your subconscious accept the death of the old program and prepares it to embrace the new one. Another key in this month is patience. The subconscious may push back harder than ever, but it's only because the transformation is becoming real. This is like the final storm before the calm. Hermstring uses the image of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Inside the cocoon, the caterpillar literally dissolves into chaos before reorganizing into a new form. If you judge that stage too soon, you'd think the creature was dying. In reality, it was becoming. So, in month 5, you hold steady. You remind yourself daily that resistance is not punishment, but confirmation. You lean into practices that ground you. Meditation, journaling, physical exercise, or time in nature. These anchor you when the old identity tries to drag you back. By the end of this month, something shifts. The resistance that once felt overwhelming begins to lose its grip. You realize you can feel fear without obeying it. You can feel grief without collapsing. You can notice sabotage without following it. This is the moment Hermstring calls crossing the threshold, because when you stop identifying with resistance, it loses its power. Month 5, then, is not about avoiding pain. It's about facing it with awareness. It's about realizing that every pang of fear, every pull of doubt, every wave of sadness is a sign that you're moving forward. And if you stay steady, the old identity will finally dissolve, leaving space for the new one to fully emerge. Don't fight the resistance, Hermstring reminds us. Respect it. It's the proof that you're not who you used to be. By the time you arrive in the 6th month, something profound has shifted. The struggle that once felt like an uphill battle begins to ease, not because life has suddenly become perfect, but because you are no longer the same person who started the journey. This stage is what Owen Hermstring calls integration. It is where the new reality is no longer just a vision you're chasing, but the ground you are standing on. Integration doesn't mean every problem disappears. It means that your responses to those problems are now aligned with the identity you have been building. Where before you would have reacted with fear, you now respond with clarity. Where before you would have sabotaged yourself, you now choose alignment. Where before you doubted, you now act from conviction. Hermstring describes it this way in The Law Behind the Laws. True change is not proven by a single win, but by consistency. When the new patterns survive the storms of life, you know they are yours. That's the essence of integration. It's about embodying your new identity even when the challenges remain. One of the clearest signs of integration is when old triggers lose their power. Think back to the fears, doubts, or patterns that held you captive for years. In month 6, you start encountering them again, but this time, something feels different. The triggers still appear, but they no longer dominate you. They are like shadows of the past that can no longer control the present. That's when you realize your subconscious has truly been reprogrammed. Another hallmark of integration is ease. Actions that once felt forced now flow naturally. Perhaps in month 1, repeating affirmations felt awkward. In month 2, visualization felt like pretending. In month 3, habits felt like discipline. By month 6, these practices no longer feel like work. They feel like who you are. The subconscious has adopted them as its new normal, and when the subconscious accepts, reality follows. But Hermstring warns not to confuse ease with passivity. Integration is not the end of growth, but the beginning of a new cycle, he reminds us. That's why month 6 is not about sitting back. It's about consciously sealing in the changes so they don't fade. One way to do this is through ritual. Some people create a celebration, marking the death of the old self and the birth of the new. Others write a manifesto of the principles they now live by. Others commit to teaching what they've learned, because nothing strengthens an identity like sharing it with others. In this stage, you also realize that you no longer chase your goals with desperation. Instead, you embody the frequency of those goals daily. You don't try to get abundance. You live as if you already are abundant. You don't try to find love. You live as if you already are love. You don't try to force success. You carry yourself as someone who is already successful. This shift is critical because the universe responds not to your words, but to your state of being. Another powerful aspect of integration is gratitude. You begin to see how every step of the 6-month journey was necessary. Even the resistance, even the grief. What once felt like setbacks now feel like stepping stones. Hermstring emphasizes that gratitude is not just a virtue, but a frequency. Gratitude locks in reality because it signals to your subconscious that the new world is safe to remain in, he writes. In other words, when you are grateful, your subconscious stops looking for ways to return to the old reality. It accepts the new one as home. Integration also comes with responsibility. Once you've proven that you can reprogram your subconscious and reshape your reality, you can no longer hide behind excuses. You know too much. You've seen firsthand that your inner alignment creates your outer world. Hermstring challenges his readers. When you awaken, you owe it to yourself to live awake. Anything less is betrayal. That responsibility may feel heavy, but it's also liberating, because if you've changed once, you can change again. So what does life look like at the end of these 6 months? It doesn't mean you never face struggle. It means you no longer identify as the person who is stuck. It means you face life with the confidence that no matter what arises, you have the tools to stay aligned. It means you have crossed from being a victim of your subconscious to being its master. And that shift, subtle though it may seem, changes everything. Hermstring closes this section of his book with a line worth remembering. The miracle isn't that you changed your life in 6 months. The miracle is that you remembered you were always the one shaping it. And that is the truth of integration. You realize that you never needed to beg the universe for change. You needed to change the script you were living from. You needed to reprogram the subconscious laws running in the background. Now that you've done it, the world cannot help but mirror back the identity you embody. Month 6 is not an ending. It is the beginning of living consciously, permanently aware of the law behind the laws, permanently free from the autopilot you once called life. It is not perfection, but presence. It is not fantasy, but freedom. And from here, the only question left is, what new reality will you choose to create next? If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, share this video, and comment below the reality you're ready to create in the next 6 months. The shift begins the moment you decide.